Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I feel like a minister. That's kind of fun. Although Dr. Sories reminded me, you're not a minister of a church, right, earlier this week when we were chatting. But anyway, good morning, everyone. I really want to thank you all for being here with us today. I'm Vicki Yates-Glisson. I'm the Secretary of the Cabinet for Health and Family Services. And we're so pleased to have so many wonderful folks here with us today to talk about this very, very important subject for Kentucky, adoption and foster care. We're pleased that you're also able to join us because today this is a summit to help save the children of Kentucky. This is a summit to help save the children of Kentucky. Besides our audience, though, here at the administrative office of the courts, we're at the actual courts building here in Frankfort, I also want to welcome those of you who are watching from your places of worship, maybe your business, or even in your home today. We encourage each of you to get engaged in this conversation on social media. And I know the governor, you love social media. You're making me a believer, so I'm getting there. I actually have a Twitter account now, so thank you very much. And so we want you to text or email your friends. We want you to ask them to watch and to share this live stream on Facebook. And when you tweet about the summit, use the hashtag, and Governor, we're learning, We Are Kentucky, and that is with a KY. We Are Kentucky, so please use that hashtag. You can also get more information about Open Hearts, Open Homes, the summit that we're having here today, by emailing openhearts@ky.gov or going to the First Lady's website of adopt.ky.gov. She's got a lovely website dealing with adoption and foster care. Or you can also call 1-800-232-KIDS, and that's KIDS. KIDS. So those are the ways you can get additional information about what we're talking about today. Any of the documents that we have, the materials that folks have here today, you can get it from either those websites or by calling. We'll make sure that you get that information. Importantly, we want to make sure that you have access to our cabinet and to the First Lady's office, and that you can, if you are interested, we want to make sure we respond to you. So we've tried to make that as easy as possible. So that 1-800 number, you will actually get a voice and someone will answer that for you. We're excited about this opportunity today so that we can start beginning to work together to ensure the children in this state are safe, that they're cared for, and that they're loved. Now, to begin today, it's very appropriate, I think, that we have an invocation, and I would like to call upon Dr. Paul Chitwood. Dr. Chitwood is the president of the Kentucky Baptist Convention, and he's going to lead us in a word of prayer as we start this summit this morning.
Thank you, Secretary Gleason, and we are grateful for the way you're using your office to minister to the children and families of Kentucky, and certainly grateful for the way that Governor and First Lady Bevan are using that office, and all who assist them in that work, and for all of you who are part of making sure that particularly abused and neglected kids in Kentucky are cared for. We thank God for you, and I want to pray for you now. Let's bow together. Father, you teach us in the Scriptures that you are the Father of the fatherless, a helper to the fatherless. You watch over and sustain the fatherless, and you rescue the fatherless. You have warned us not to take advantage of the fatherless, but called us to defend the fatherless, even judging our religion as pure and undefiled to the extent that we care for the fatherless. And so as we gather here in this place on this day, Father, we thank you for your love for the orphan, for the abused and neglected children of Kentucky. And we thank you for those whom you have providentially set in place in this state to extend your love and care for the abused and neglected children of Kentucky. Lord, we do pray for our governor and our First Lady, thanking you for their love for the fatherless, thanking you, Lord, for the way they have modeled caring for children, welcoming the orphans into their very home and family. And for all who are here today, Lord, who have obviously upon their hearts, the hurting kids of this state. We give you thanks. What was being undertaken is beyond us, Lord. To fix a system that was rightly designed to help kids, but at this point is in such great need of fixing. Lord, we know this is bigger than any government, any church, any denomination. And so might you bring us all together, and with your help, might children who need love be loved, who need homes and families receive homes and families, who need rescued, oh God, might they be rescued, and help us in our efforts to that end. We pray in Christ's name. Amen.
Good morning to all of you. That's where we intersect so often on issues involving families, and so it was important that we began to talk to each other a lot more to try to understand how we work and to work better for the benefit of children. The purpose of this effort was to identify barriers and strategize solutions to serve Kentucky's children and Kentucky's families in a better way. We felt so strongly about the importance of these conversations that we have on a regular basis that after Justice Noble died, I decided that I would myself become personally involved. And so I'm pleased that on a regular basis, I meet with Secretary Glisson, with Deputy Secretary Feely, Commissioner Johnson, Commissioner Cockrell, and representatives of the Kentucky Court of Justice, the cabinets, the Department of Juvenile Justice, and the Kentucky Department of Education, all in conversation on a regular basis to try to find ways to break down barriers that affect children and families in Kentucky. The Kentucky Department of Justice, Kentucky Cabinet, the Court of Justice is committed to continuing these efforts in order to improve relationships, reduce barriers, and achieve the best outcomes for our children and our families. And I want to take a moment here to recognize our Citizens Foster Care Review Boards. Back in 1984, Kentucky law required that the Citizens Foster Care Review Board review cases of children who are in custody of the Cabinet for Health and Family Services because of dependency, abuse, and neglect. In fiscal year 2016, 270 Citizens Foster Care Review Board volunteers conducted nearly 21,000 reviews of more than 11,000 children who are in out-of-home care. The Citizen Foster Care Review volunteers continue to make informed recommendations to judges on issues of permanency plans that are in the best interest of the children. And finally, I want to affirm the Court of Justice's commitment to reducing the disproportionate number of minorities in care across the child-serving systems. We're working on efforts to train our judges and court personnel and community partners on local data and implicit biases in order to improve outcomes for children. I'm looking forward to being with you throughout the course of this meeting today to learn more about how the Court of Justice can better serve Kentucky's families and children. But again, welcome here. We're really proud of this facility. Formerly, we took a Home Depot building and converted it to good use, and we're real proud of it. So I hope that while you're here today, if you get a chance, we'll open the doors and give you a tour. I'd love to do that. Now to move on, Secretary, thank you again for having me here. Thank you for being here. I look forward to this program.
Thank you, Chief Justice Minton. There really is divine intervention, don't you believe? This, I think, got some renewal, I believe, whenever Justice Minton and I sat next to each other at the prayer breakfast at the inauguration. And so we're sitting there and we're chatting, and I'm a lawyer by background. I actually spent my first job as a clerk for one of the Supreme Court justices. So I have an affinity for the Supreme Court, and so we were chatting about the relationship with the cabinet and how it needs to be improved with the court system. And I said, we want to make ourselves available. We want to work together. The cabinet has a piece of this, but the court system also has such a significant piece. And we need to figure out how we break those barriers down and work more closely together. Juvenile justice also has a piece of it. County attorneys have a piece of it. So I want to commend Chief Justice Menton. He said, we've had a group. Let's make sure that we renew that commitment. And he immediately appointed Justice Noble to take that on when she retired. To his credit, thank you so much. I know you've got so much on your plate. But Justice Menton said, this is too important to the Commonwealth. I will chair this group, and I'll make sure we keep this going on a regular basis. So we meet on a regular basis. We have a really robust agenda, and the court system has welcomed in the cabinet to be able to go in and work closely with particularly the judges across the state, doing education, having dialogue, working together to try to break those barriers down. So that is in the process, is happening, and I want to thank the Chief Justice for making that happen. It takes someone to own it, and you did that, and thank you so much, Chief Justice. Thank you. I also want to just recognize, I think we have a few other folks that are very important to our cabinet and what we do, and that's certainly the chairwoman of the Health and Welfare Committee. I see Adia Wushner here, and I want to thank you for your support of our cabinet and children across the state. I hope I haven't missed anyone else, but I saw Representative Wushner when I came in. And I also want to thank the other secretaries in the cabinet that provide support to our cabinet. I mean, these are a great group of folks. These are great. They are just wonderful. That no one acts like you're silly, or if you go to them, you're always willing to listen, always willing to help. And so I want to recognize the fact that they came to help here to support us today. We have Secretary Ramsey, who is the Secretary of the Labor Cabinet, Secretary Dickerson, who is head of Public Protection. And if there are any other secretaries here, I apologize, but I just know that they are here. If they're not here physically, they're here in spirit. And I just want you to know that there is a great deal of collaboration that happens all across the cabinet, the executive branch. And I'm going to talk in a few moments about why that is so important, because it really does take everyone together to make this happen. So a little bit about what I would like to share with you for a few minutes this morning is that I just want to kind of talk about how children have ended up in the foster system. How did we end up with like 8,000 children that are right now in foster care? A number of children are in kinship care. I think that it's my job, I think, to kind of just sort of set a stage for you so that you'll understand, wow, why is this such a problem? What's happened? What's going on? Haven't there always been orphans and children that have been in foster care? But I wanted you to know that we're at kind of a crucial crossroads, and we really, really need your help. And so I really kind of want to share with you a few comments around why it is so important right now that these children need you, and how that we've got some real issues in this state that we need to address. And so I commend the governor, I commend the First Lady. They knew early on about why this was something that needed to be fixed. It goes to the very moral fabric of our state. And so we need to fix this now, or we're going to lose generations to come. So some of the things that I want you to know is that one of the responsibilities of the Cabinet for Health and Family Services is that it's our job at the Cabinet, our piece of this puzzle, is that our part is to keep children out of harm's way. So that's why my little part of the talk here is called Out of Harm's Way. Our job, we'll get calls into the child welfare system, someone either from a hospital, an interested relative, a neighbor, whatever, that says, I think this child is in harm's way. And so then to keep children safe, many times our cabinet then has to go in and investigate, and unfortunately we have to remove a child from their home. And we have to take them into state care, and they become foster children. So those foster children then are now in what many people call the state system. They are not in foster care, and I think it's very important to know this and why you need to know why these children need you. They are not there because these children did anything. They are usually victims of circumstances that are well beyond their control. There are a number of factors that I think have put these children in harm's way, particularly now in our state. And unfortunately, we see these factors over and over again. And I know that I'm preaching to the choir when I look out and I see many of our social workers and many of our folks that work in the cabinet. Over and over again, we see these same factors. Drug addiction. I would be remiss if I didn't mention drug addiction. Drug-addicted parents. It's now common. It's all over the state. It's in every family, every community, every demographic. No geographic location is immune. Children then have to be removed from their homes when their parents are overdosing, when they're addicted to drugs. Again, no fault of their own. In fact, more than 70%, can you believe this factor? And we're still trying to make sure we think this number may even be greater. In fact, more than 70% of the time, substance use disorders, drug addiction, is a contributing factor to the removal of children from their home, 70% of the time. It's not just substance abuse. Kentucky also has a whole myriad of other issues that I want you to be aware of. Essentially, and Dr. Chitwood, I think you mentioned this, it's the demise of the family. We see this across the way. Many children are just left to have to fend for themselves. Poverty in Kentucky is a factor, I believe. Can you believe it? 19% of the folks here in Kentucky live in poverty. In addition, the number of Kentucky's children with an incarcerated parent is nearly double that of the national average. We are the highest in the nation. So for many of these children, their parent is being taken out of their home because they've gone to prison. And then there's the poor health status of many of our citizens. They are plagued by chronic diseases. It could be cancer, it could be diabetes, it could be obesity, heart disease, but they're not able to take care of their children. I must say that under the direction of the governor and our state's Section 1115 waiver, I'm sure many of you have heard about this, that Medicaid waiver is actually trying to address many, if not most, of these issues. To do this, it requires our cabinets, Secretary Ramsey, Secretary Dickerson, Secretary Heiner over at Education, it requires our cabinets to work together collaboratively because we're trying to transform a whole system. This waiver is needed to help our residents to address health. We want them to be healthy. We want them to be more skilled. We want them to have we want them to be able to get back in the workforce, whether it's in Secretary Ramsey's apprenticeship program to get training, whether it's through Secretary Heiner and to improve their education, to get a job coach, but to prepare them, importantly, prepare these individuals for employment so that they're now better able to take care of their families. They've got a good job. They feel respect for themselves. They've gotten through their drug issues, and they're now actually able to help and to actually care for their families. When the governor asked me to join his team, he made it very clear that he and the First Lady, this was one of their priorities. Medicaid was a priority. Adoption and foster care was a priority. And he wanted to make sure that all children, and the First Lady wanted to make sure that all children are healthy, safe, cared for, loved, and that they're actually able to live in a home that is nurturing. That is a really big, tall order. But I'm asking all of you, we have to do this together. Government cannot do it alone. I think Dr. Chitwood and I had that conversation earlier today. We're not the answer. We cannot. We are a piece of it. We can help, but government is not the total answer, and we cannot do this alone. So that's why we have set out this call for this summit. We need everyone. We need private sector. We need nonprofits. We need churches. Churches need to go back to their very mission that they had. The churches had orphanages. They had these homes. We need to go back and think about models. We need to go back and completely disrupt the system. The system is not working. Everybody says it doesn't work. We need to completely disrupt the system, bring the stakeholders together, and that's what we're asking so that we can rebuild this system again. I think we've learned from mistakes, and so that's why we really, really need your help. But I also want to take just a moment, and I would be remiss if I did not also recognize many of the social workers. And I know we have a lot of folks joining us by social media, our social workers throughout the state. I want to say thank you to them. I want to recognize them. Many of you are from many counties across the state. I want you to take the time, if you would, when you go to your little town. I grew up in Spencer County, Kentucky, so when I'm in Taylorsville, stop at your DCBS office. Stop in your DCBS office and go in and tell that social worker, thank you. Thank you. I have been so impressed with the social workers and the dedicated staff throughout the Cabinet for Health and Family Services. Those social workers, of all individuals, they put their life at risk day in and day and night to keep people safe, to keep children safe, to keep families safe. They walk in, many times they don't have cell phone service. They walk into a volatile situation, families are falling apart, they don't know what they're going to be seeing or what's going to meet them. yet they go in and day and night. So I cannot tell you how much we appreciate them. We're fortunate that we have them. They are there because they want to keep Kentucky's children safe. And so again, thank you so much to the social workers that are joining us throughout the state through social media and that are also here today. Thank you very much. Each day that I come to work, my one resolve is that I want to make sure that the lives of Kentuckians are better. That's a pretty tall order too. But nothing weighs more heavily on my mind and heart than these children who are waiting for a forever family. These children who are in the state system are losing their opportunity to truly receive the nurturing and loving oversight that they need to become productive adults. While these children are kept out of harm's way, they need our guidance, our assistance, our direction, but most of all, they need love. These children need a stable home, they need a good life, they need good food to eat, they need a bed to sleep in, they need someone to tuck them in. It will break your heart when you go out there. These children want to come home with you, and I always feel like one evening they're going to probably follow me right on home because it just breaks your heart, but they're out there and they want you and they're asking for you. They will say, I want a home, I want a forever home. So these are the things that many of us take for granted. We don't even think about it. But to the children that are anxiously awaiting a new family, they are the things that dreams are made of, and you can make those dreams come true. Meeting this need is not going to be easy, but together, with your help, I'm optimistic that we can meet the challenges that we face. We're going to be able to find these forever homes for these children, and we're also going to maybe finally be able to reform the foster care and adoption care system. It grieves me when folks tell me it's easier to go out of this country to adopt a child than it is here in Kentucky. That cannot, should not, and I am pledging it will not be the case. We have got to change that. And now let me finish by just saying, as some of you in this room know, or maybe some of you watching on this Facebook or via Facebook know, sometimes the adults need the kids just as much or sometimes more than the children need the adults. This was the case for one Central Kentucky family. Please listen as this couple shares their story of foster and adoption.
You want to tell the story?
No, you tell the story. I think you do it better than I do.
I was the sports guy at Channel 18, and she was working nights and weekends, same shift I was working. The story I tell is like she walked through the newsroom and she winked at me and smiled, and I was done. I was hooked at that moment. I knew that she was my soulmate. She may not have known it yet, but that's how I knew it.
I think that's very sweet of you.
I found out early on in my adult life it was going to be like medically impossible for me to father a kid.
I was a foster child. My father killed my mother when I was 7 years old. I was there in the home that night and ended up being sent to a children's home. And I grew up in a children's home. So I lived in the children's home from the time I was 7 until 18. That's kind of how we got involved in foster care because it was always at forefront in my heart.
That's why the foster care and adoption system is so important to us because, the way she grew up, that was very important for her to give back to somebody. There's so many kids here in our backyard.
Who need families.
The fact that God made me where I couldn't have children was the best blessing He ever gave me. Because it gave me these boys. The first time I held him, when I got to meet him, it's like, I knew why this was happening to me. I knew why I couldn't father a child because I didn't know at the time there was a kid up in northern Kentucky that was gonna need me. Like I said, I needed them as much as they needed me, so it gave me my family. And being a dad is very gratifying. So we are very pro-adoption and pro-foster care because it warms your heart and opens your heart in ways you never thought would ever be possible.
I was watching for Amanda Lemon. I think she's here with us. She was intended to be. Is Amanda, are you here with us today? Well, Amanda, who is part of this video, was planning to be with us today, and I just wanted to, I think if we could just give a quick round of applause, so they may be joining us by social media, to say thank you. Thank you to the Lemons for their service. Thank you. So, now I have the true pleasure of, and I have the pleasure, you have the pleasure, because I get to hear this every time I get to meet with the governor, of hearing today from folks that are truly passionate about foster care and adoption. I'm gratified that so many of you are here. I believe that you're passionate about foster care and adoption. I know many of you are advocates for this, and I want to thank you. But we really proudly count among those voices of folks that are passionate about this issue, the First Family of Kentucky. The Bevins truly understand what it is to be involved in this challenge that we're issuing to you today. They walk the walk, they talk the talk, because they serve as a model for each of us every day. Please welcome Governor Matt Bevin and the First Lady of Kentucky, Glenna Bevin, as they talk about a call to care.
Thank you. This is a very emotional topic for us. It really is. Thank you very much. Thanks for being here. I tell you what, if I don't start crying on you, that'll be a bonus. It really will. This is a topic that is very near and dear to us. My wife, when she came in here and saw the size of the room of people, she said, "You're on your own, buddy." And yet she is very graciously here. I will tell you this, people often wonder how they say, "Oh, how can you do this? You're the governor and you have all these children and everything." You marry well. That's how you do it. And I'm blessed by this woman right here. I truly am. It is true that I've got 9 children, and it's also true that she's got 10, because she has to count me as one of them. And it is not an easy path. And I'm going to come back, and I think afterwards, and speak to you again briefly. So I'll just say a couple things at the front end. First of all, you're going to hear from a man, Dr. Soares, who's going to move you, who's going to challenge you, who's going to give you things to think about. First time I heard him speak, powerful story, but I had a chance to sit down with him afterwards at some length, and I think in a bit of a surprise to both of us, just found we were kindred spirits in some respects, with a real passion for seeing change come. Our story is one that led us here as a result of many different links. But we tried to adopt through the foster system in Kentucky some years ago, and the system was broken. It did not work well. You know this. Some of you have experienced this, and as was noted by our secretary, it has nothing to do with the desire and the hard work and the efforts of so many that are working inside the system. We are blessed with some of the most extraordinary social workers, some of the most extraordinary case workers, and the people who are trying at every turn to make the process work. But like so many governmental organizations and programs, it's become convoluted and bureaucratic to the degree that it's just not effective. And to make a very long story short, we tried to adopt a young girl who was 11 years old, had never been in a family, had never had a permanent family, had been in and out of multiple foster situations. Nobody was trying to adopt this young girl at 11. Often kids are more difficult to find homes for because people don't want, they want to adopt a young child, and I respect that. I'll come back to this later. I'm going to challenge all of you here, those of you watching, those of you who know people who might have been here or who could maybe subsequently come and look at this video, to rethink that narrative, to rethink the idea that it's only appropriate to start with a child from an early age. There's a lot of kids that need a home. This little girl who was 11 years old just wanted a family. And it's kind of interesting, we met this young girl at a park when she was there as part of a home she was staying in at that time. She wasn't even in a foster situation at that point. And those kids happened to be playing at the park, and our kids happened to be playing at a park. This little girl never knew that we tried to adopt her. We went through crazy amounts of programs and training, some of the training being administered to us who at the time we had 4 or 5 children. We had 5 children already at that time. And Some of the parenting classes were being taught to us by people who weren't even parents, which I found interesting. And we had to go through these over and over, being fingerprinted multiple times, writing checks every time we turned around, people inside and outside of our home, people interviewing us, interviewing our children, all these things that went on. The end result of which was we were told, you know what, we've decided, and I don't even know who it was ultimately that decided it, that we've decided it's better for this child to stay in the foster care system because she'll get more attention than to, heaven forbid, be the sixth child in a family. Wouldn't want that. Crazy. And it was that kind of lack of logic. I thought, who better than a family that has proven they can love and take care of 5 kids, to potentially love and take care of a 6th child? And then we've got to rethink the way in which we approach this. And it breaks my heart, this little girl, I don't know where she is today, but she's a young adult somewhere out there. Chances are she never found a home. We failed her. The system failed her. And she's just one of thousands of children. As was noted by the secretary, there's 8,000 children right now in our foster system. That number comes and goes. There will always be some normative number that will be in that system. But there are currently well over 1,000 of these children that are able to be adopted, on track to be adopted. Probably about 2/3 of them will be adopted by families that are fostering them now. But fully 1/3 of them, even right now, 300 and some odd, 350 plus or minus, young people are right now fully able to and desirous of being adopted. There's more than 6,000 churches in Kentucky. There should not be any child in Kentucky able to be adopted, ready to be adopted, wanting to be adopted, who does not have a home. There just should not be. And we can sit here, we can talk about it, we can think about it, we can pray about it, we can hope for it. But truth be told, we've got to get off our duffs and do something about it. It's our responsibility. It's our obligation. We are indeed our brother's keeper. This is a mandate that many of us know personally. We are blessed. We have subsequently adopted children. We did have to go outside this country, interestingly. We adopted 4 children. We now have 9 children. They usually all are fed, bathed, and taken care of. I won't swear that it's 100% of the time, but no, it's really, here's the reality. We joke sometimes. We drive in a 12-passenger van. We joke sometimes that, we have all the kids. We're like, well, we have enough. It's all, if we figure if we missed one, we'll catch up with them at some point. We've sometimes had someone else's kid in there, and we thought it was our own. The reality is this. You know this if you're parents. There are no perfect parents. We're not perfect parents. But do we love these children? You bet we love these children. Do we love those that were born to us and those that were adopted into our family as much as we love the next? You bet we do. Do they each in turn give us fits at times? You bet they do. Do we work through that like every parent does with their children? You bet we do. And there's nothing more than that we would expect of and hope for those in Kentucky, to be able to take these children into our homes. And I will say this, I'm going to just note a couple of things that have been done. We've talked about some of the work that's being done. And some of the things we've done, you see a lot of folks wearing these red tape buttons. Some people wonder, what is this? It's a little pair of scissors that are cutting through some red tape. There's a lot of red tape in the adoption process, a lot of red tape in the foster care process in this state. We are working to minimize that. That's one thing that we've done. We're reviewing some of the provider reimbursement models. These things are underway right now. Simplifying the process for the upfront startup payments in terms of the way this process works. Expanding in-home supports to parents that are struggling with drug addiction, some of which the Secretary just alluded to. Reestablishing drug courts. Hiring retired law enforcement officers to assist with some of these investigations. It is a dangerous situation for folks to go into some of these volatile situations. And so we're getting retired law enforcement folks to be able to go along and assist with this. What a powerful impact that makes on all parties concerned, and the ability that gives to the social workers to be able to do their job safely and confidently. We've trained, some of the streamlining of the process for training to allow new workers to carry their cases more quickly. I mean, this is another thing that we are working on right now. We have in this legislative agenda something that my wife has started a program with a number of children in the foster system. And this group of children have been an advisory council, this youth advisory council that has come together and said, hey, as kids in the system, we have ideas of things that can be done. And indeed, this group of kids made as a priority things that they would like to see made possible. The fact that they, for example, as foster kids, should be able to get driver's licenses like other kids. And why not? And the fact that they would like to be able to have a fictive kin bill, fictive being one of those words, unless you're in the system, you've never heard of it, and you think someone made a mistake, but it basically would allow someone to be taken in by a coach, or maybe somebody from their church, or somebody down the street, or somebody who's a trusted adult in their life, to be able to take them in who may not be family. And these are the types of things that through the judiciary, we need to be able to be flexible and open-minded in what is truly best for the child. Those two bills are actually going to be passed into law and signed by me. They're actually sitting on my desk. And those are two things that are going to be passed into law because of the ideas that came from children who grew up in this foster system. And I applaud them in their efforts. Just developing things like fatherhood engagement initiatives. There's things that can be done. But I will say this before we sit down and before you hear from Dr. Soares. We've got to rethink the entire process. It's been alluded to. Again, it's not for lack of effort or desire. If we are to truly become the best version of ourselves on this front, we need to rethink it. And I'm asking those of you who actually understand it to be a part of the solution. Let me just ask out of curiosity, how many of you are adoptive parents? How many of you have either fostered or adopted a child in this state? I mean, that's quite a number of you. I hope you take encouragement. Thank you for that. You know better than anybody how complicated the process is, how thankless and tiresome it can become, how redundant and seemingly ineffective it is at times for producing the end result. We need your input. We need your ideas. We need your thoughts. We truly do. So the solution is not going to come from the government coming up with just another new set of rules. It's going to come from fixing it from the inside out. I'm going to speak to something that we are going to be doing toward that end when I come back up in a moment. But I want to thank you. I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for caring. I want to thank you in advance for being part of the solution, because we will become the model to America. Kentucky will be the example that other states want to follow. Because I will say this, as broken as our system is, there is no state in America that's doing this as well as it needs to be done. There just is not. And I'm not sure that it is possible to do it as perfectly well as it needs to be done, but it is my determination. It is our determination, and I hope collectively our determination as a Commonwealth, that we will be the model for America, and that it will be done better here than anywhere. Again, I thank you for being here. I thank you for your attention, and I know I'm going to turn it back over to Adria Johnson, who I believe is going to introduce our speaker. Adria is somebody who, I will just brag on her for a second. As our commissioner and the head of our DCBS system, and that's our Department for Community-Based Services that so many of you are very intimately familiar with. Adria is somebody who, from the time I first met her, I've been impressed with. I felt a little bad that she had already accepted a position in another state doing a similar thing, and we lured her back, and I'm sure glad we did. I'm sure glad we did. Before she actually went there, her heart was here. Her personal story is an amazing one. She may or may not share it with you, but I'll tell you, if you don't mind, even just briefly touch on it before you introduce our speaker, because she's a person, her passion, her knowledge, her commitment is really unparalleled, and I'm blessed to have her as a member of our team. Please welcome our Commissioner, Adria Johnson.
Thank you. It is a privilege and an honor to serve, and when I did have an opportunity to sit down with the governor, when they did lure me back, he looked at me and he said, "Are you ready to shake things up here in Kentucky?" And I am. And I do walk in here determined every day to do just that. My team knows it. Many of them are here. I take this work very seriously for professional and personal reasons, and I do have a brief presentation I'll go through before Dr. Sori steps up, but I will share. I didn't intersect with the child welfare side of the house, but I know poverty, and I know poverty well. I know the intersection of, some mental illness issues in homes, a touch of domestic violence, and I know what it takes in terms of lifting families and needing to impart in them resilience and strength to overcome. So it is near and dear to me. I walked through the halls of the L&M building, and I remember those halls very clearly as a child, having spent a lot of time there. So I know the shame that comes along with that, and the importance of being very dignified and treating people with dignity and common courtesy and respect when they come through our doors. That is very near and dear to me. But I'm also one that isn't satisfied at all with status quo. And so if you talk to my team, every day we come in, it is what are we going to do differently, because none of us can be okay with what we are seeing happening here in the state, in families, in children's lives. None of us can be okay with that, and I'm going to show you some stats, and I hope that you're not okay with that. So I had the privilege of recently going to a luncheon that the governor is now beginning a series for those in leadership. And he said to us at the end, he said, "My charge to you as leaders is to come into work every day and be a better version of yourself." And so that is what I aspire to do every day I come to work. This is not a game, this is serious business. And when you see the results that you see, none of us can be okay with knowing that we are impacting children's lives in the way we are. So, again, it is a privilege to serve. It's a privilege to serve with the secretary who's passionate, with the governor and first lady who have made this cause near and dear to them, and with all of you that are here joining us today. So before I do turn it over to Pastor Sories, I would like to just take you through what is happening here in Kentucky. You've heard the why. You know that we have families that are plagued with substance abuse. Poverty is an issue, as you'll see in the very first slide. Kentucky's population of 4.4 million is made up of roughly 1.75 million families, Of those families, 800,000 of those families are in poverty. And so with us being the agency that provides comprehensive service, not just child and adult protection, but we are dealing with all of the economic supports that are helping to lift families, you can see that we have a lot of families who are not where they need to be. And so you see how that plays out in the food assistance, the cash assistance benefits that we provide, and many other services. So a lot of families need lifting. But let's talk about child abuse and neglect, because that is why we are here. And so you heard the secretary say that given what we are seeing in society, we have a lot of families where children are in harm's way, and it is our job to remove them from harm's way. You can see that for any given year, we are taking in 125,000 calls approximately of suspicions of abuse or neglect. And of those, we find that over half, or close to half, warrant investigation, meaning our frontline workers are out there figuring out what is going on in the life of that child, and you can see the prevalence of how many times we are having to actually step in and say, yes, your family is in need of services, or yes, we have to remove that child from your home. And so if you look where we currently are at about 8,000 children in care. I can tell you that 7,900 number has already grown to a little over 8,000 within just a 3-week period, and we are taking in approximately 20 more kids every month in state's custody. Children are entering at a higher rate than they are exiting care. That is a problem. We need more preventive service in the state to prevent that from happening. And you can see where those children are. By and large, the majority are in a foster care placement setting, and I'll get into that in a little more detail so you can see what that looks like. But not all of them are. We have children that are sitting in psychiatric hospitals. We have children that are sitting in residential treatment provider settings, and so that becomes concerning as well when they're lingering. And we do have children lingering, and you will clearly see that in just a few slides. And if you look at the kinship care number, what what you need to be aware of with where that is concerned is that is probably very conservative, because that number represents the number of families that are receiving a kinship care monetary benefit, and that moratorium was put in place in 2013, so we have no way of knowing how many children are actually in relatives' custody, and a relative is not receiving that monetary benefit. So the bottom line is we have a lot of families that are not residing, a lot of children, excuse me, that are not residing at home. And you have in your folder, you have a statewide foster care fax. We publish that monthly. If you go to our website, you'll see that. You can see the statistics, and it breaks down even more information on those children, the risk factors that are present, the agent removal, and some other dynamics. And that is published monthly on our website. So let's talk about our capacity to care for these children, where we actually as a state have to step in and say, we have to bring you into state's custody. And what this slide doesn't show you is that we have many gaps in the need for foster parents. You know, by and large, the majority of children in care do have a goal of reunification, and I'll get into that in a few slides as well. But for those in a foster care setting, we aren't at capacity. And the numbers that you see are statewide. This becomes more pronounced in the areas where you see need as you look at specific regions and specific counties across the state. So you can see that our older children, very hard to find foster families that are willing to take in older teens. Very hard to find foster families that will take sibling groups. Very hard to find foster families that will take medically complex children and children of color. And again, those numbers become more pronounced as you look across the state in certain pockets. What the slide doesn't show you, and if my protection and permanency folks were up here talking to you, is that we struggle with capacity daily, placement capacity daily. We struggle to find places for these children to go because children have been traumatized. So we are dealing with children that have very complex issues. We are dealing with children who are on the autism spectrum disorder. We are dealing with children who have been victims of human trafficking. We are dealing with children who are diabetic and require insulin, co-occurring issues, sexual behavior issues. We don't have adequate families that are equipped and have the supports they need to accept those children into their homes. And so diligent recruitment is a very real issue for the state of Kentucky, and we have to do better. And we are hoping with your help today we can do better. And the interesting thing, when you think about what you hear about the children that are placed in more restrictive settings, they feel as if that's a continued demoralization of their circumstance. And they feel as if it's bad enough that I'm in foster care, but I'm also not worthy of even being in a foster home setting. So I'm lingering here in a psych hospital, in a residential treatment facility. So you can imagine what that makes them feel like. So now, let's talk about the children that are actually available for adoption. And so again, the majority of children do have a goal of reunification where we have a family that is making the effort to do what they need to do to deal with their circumstance, get their home stable, and accepting of those children back in there. But we have many children that can't do that. About a third of children aren't in a position to go back home, and it is appropriate for them for their goal to change to adoption and for us to hopefully quickly find a family that is willing to be that forever family for them. And so you can see the statistics of the 2,400 approximately that actually have a goal of adoption. As you heard our governor say, a little over 1,200 of them are ready to be adopted. That means termination of parental rights has occurred, and there is nothing preventing someone from being allowed to be that forever family. As you also heard our governor say, 2/3 of those children have a home identified, and in the majority of cases, that is in the current foster home where they reside. But the gap, as you heard our governor mention, of the 400 or so kids, there is no adoptive family identified, and they are lingering in care. So what happens as an agency is when we have those kids identified, they become referred into what is known as our special needs adoption program. And right now, we have 266 of those children that are in that program. Now, people hear the term SNAP. We call that a SNAP program and special needs. But that is very misleading because the SNAP program, what defines a special needs child is what comes to mind when you hear the term. It could be a variety of things. It could be a minority child over the age of 2. It could be sibling groups again. It could be children that are older. It could be children that have certain special physical, behavioral, educational needs. But the biggest piece is it could be children that are languishing. And if you look in your packet, you will see that you have a few different handouts that provide you detail on the SNAP population. You have a state map. That state map shows you where these 266 children are that are currently identified in the SNAP program. And what you need to take note of with the state map is that is the county of case assignment, meaning that that is where, in most cases, the child has been removed and brought into state's custody, so that is their home of origin. But not every child is sitting in their home of origin. You also have information that breaks that information down by age group, and again, by specific county within that region, so you can see where there are children in those communities of which you all come from that need forever families. Now, what's not on the slide that you need to be aware of is most children in SNAP are older teens. Most of those are males instead of females, and not all of those children that have been lingering in SNAP are in a foster home setting currently. 98 of those children, or 37%, are sitting in an other setting, meaning psych hospital or residential placement facility. And here's what you need to be aware of that really bothers me, quite frankly, tugs at my soul deeply, is when you look at the time these children have been available for adoption, on average, that is 35 months. That's 3 years. Now, when you add on the amount of time they have been in out-of-home care before they were even available for adoption, it becomes more like 5 years, 62 months. And in the most extreme cases, which deeply troubles my soul, we have children that have been in SNAP available for adoption for 116 months. The most egregious, because I do think it's egregious, the most egregious case is 146 months. That's 12 years when you add on the time in out-of-home care. And so it should be no surprise, as you heard our governor say, that the ultimate failure is we have children in the state of Kentucky who are aging out of care each and every year, each and every month without a home base. And I don't know about you, but I have two 20-something-year-olds myself, and transitioning into adulthood has not been easy. So I can't imagine them not having a home base, not having a home to go to over the holidays, when an emergency happens, or even to celebrate life's joys. You have no one to share that with. We have begun a fostering success program, which has been wonderful. We are taking children that are aging out and employing them within our own cabinet to give them opportunity for mentorship, for coaching, developing, to help introduce them into the professional career world in a positive way and hopefully wrap supports around them. What's interesting to note is we attempted to find and to partner with families that would be willing to kind of mentor these children. And when we had the report out and kind of the closeout of this program where our governor spoke, I walked up to one of the young ladies that had participated afterward, and I said, "How's it going?" Very strong young lady, a lot of skills, and she said to me, she said, "Well, I just want to share some feedback with you." She said, "I was a little disappointed because while I was paired with a family, I wanted a forever family. I needed more than just the 10-week period I was participating in fostering success to have someone to lean on. These older youth need us, as you heard our governor say, just as much as the itty-bitties do. And because we know what they age out to. What do they age out to? Incarceration, homelessness, death, poor health outcomes. It's not okay. And the last statistic that really bothers me, every time I look at the foster care fact, is for any youth in care, on average, 1/3 of their life is in care. None of us should sleep at night knowing that. It's just not okay. But what have we done? And well, before we get to what have we done, let's talk about the voice that we need in all of this, because as our governor said, we can't do this by ourselves. We can't do this in a vacuum. And the voices that need to weigh in on this are the very voices that are living this and experiencing this and trying to be supportive. And so we did go out and do a survey of foster families currently in the state, and we had an amazing response. But the number one recurring theme, we asked a variety of quantitative questions, and I'll show you some statistics on that. But then we had an open-ended, what can we do better? And by and large, almost every other comment that I read, and there were 340 of them, and I read each and every one of them, it said children are lingering too long in care. The state has got to do something better. We have got to figure this out. They also talked about the fact, as you heard our governor say, with his own experience, we have to make this less burdensome. He's right, there is a practicality and common sense piece to this that needs to be introduced, which is why the red tape reduction is so wonderful to see, because we have got it wrong. We want families to help us, but yet we make the requirement burdensome and we make it unrealistic and inconvenient, and that's not okay. So we heard overwhelmingly, while we recognize that you all are making strides in some areas, there's continued work that needs to be done. For example, training. Can we make that convenient to where we live? Can we make that convenient to how we work? Every couple doesn't work a 9 to 5. Why are we requiring families to take the training together when that's not realistic for how they live their lives? They talked about the paperwork burden, the turning in of receipts. There has to be a better way. And then they also talked about just the very real dynamic of being a foster family. And this one hit me a little bit because I'm not a foster parent, but they talked about the grief aspect and that we as foster parents need support because it is a grieving process. You have to say goodbye to these children. You would be inhumane if you didn't begin to love them. You are caring for them in your home, and so we need to recognize that. We need to acknowledge that, and we need to have supports in place that allow these families to grieve and to have some support in dealing with that. They talked about communication with our workers. I, for one, am the first person that keeps championing we need more workforce. We have a lot of workforce instability. But as my team will tell you, just because we don't always have enough people to go around, that doesn't mean we can shirk our responsibilities either. We don't get a pass. And so we have to find a way to improve our communication, because that was also a very pronounced theme in the comments that we heard. I don't know what's going on. I can't get in touch with somebody. So we need to make some improvements on our end as well. We need to own what's ours in our house and fix it. So again, back to some of the quantitative things, I was very encouraged to hear that most that were surveyed that hadn't adopted would absolutely consider adopting a child. Most would consider fostering siblings. So you can see that we had great response, and we had a lot of positive response in terms of where we need supports, how people are actually willing to give us supports. So you heard the governor talk about some improvements to date. He talked about the driver's license bill. That was a continuation of what is called normalcy standards. I think there was recognition that if we are asking people to be foster families, we need to allow them to exercise with the same reasonable and prudent parenting standards over which we would our own children. If we trust them to take our child, then we should trust them to make decisions on behalf of that child, just like they do for their own. And so we are very proud that for the past 2 legislative sessions, we have introduced legislation that has been passed that has allowed a more normal way of working in this system for parents that are willing to step in and help us. Yes. Again, the overwhelming theme was children are lingering. And again, owning what's ours, we looked at where is there a backlog of court action that needs to take place in terms of initiating those petitions for filing for termination of parental rights. We recognized we didn't have an adequate regional attorney base to support that. So we have done some things about that in the cabinet. We've brought some additional supports in place so that at least what is ours, we can be timely in the filing of those petitions so that those can be put on court dockets, those cases can be heard, those hearings can be made, and these children can truly be available to be adopted for permanency. I would like to add that in 2016, we did achieve the greatest number of adoptions that we have in the past 10 years. So I am very proud of that. We are also fortunate to be working with the Dave Thomas Foundation. We don't have adequate staff across the state to do everything, and we can't do everything. They have been wonderful. They said, we want to invest in Kentucky. We want to bring not only investment that will allow us to bring on over the next 18 months 71 diligent recruiters who hopefully will be working with all of you that are willing to step in this and identifying families in your parts of the state to help us get adoptive and foster families for the children that so desperately need them. But not only is it actually helping us with the workforce, it's actually introducing the model that no child is unadoptable. Because I can tell you right now, if you're a math person and you quickly took note, you saw that we have 382 children available for adoption, but only 266 are actually in the SNAP program. Why is that a gap? And I can tell you that right now, it does happen. We do have children who have indicated themselves that they don't want to be adopted. Now, I don't know about you, and I respect a 17-year-old, a 16-year-old weighing in on their own future, but they are just 16 or 17 years old. They can't have an appreciation for what life is going to be like if they don't have a family as a base in their life. And so how hard are we pushing that issue with them when they're saying, I don't want to be adopted? I don't know the answer to that, but I would venture to say that I'm not sure we're pushing it all that hard in every case. And we need to have the exact same framework, no matter what that child is going through, no matter what behaviors are presenting. Every child deserves a family. Every child deserves to be loved. And so again, you heard the governor say we've enhanced some supports to kin caregivers. There's been a lot of pressure on this administration to lift the moratorium that provided the monetary stipend. That doesn't go unnoticed, that doesn't go unheard. We are balancing many different priorities as we head into the next budgetary legislative session, but we did look at what can we do. I can't lift the moratorium currently, but I can extend the daycare provision that used to be 6 months to 12 months. That's huge. We all know what a daycare expense is. It's like a second mortgage. So allowing that benefit to be in place has been hugely beneficial for families, and we're not done. We're continuing to look at ways to possibly even extend that beyond the 12-month mark. You heard him talk about the upfront payment. That was burdensome. We're giving you money to bring a child into your home, but we're going to make that just as burdensome as it possibly can be for you to go out and get some needed provision immediately to bring that child in your home. That shouldn't be. We've also reminded folks that while we can't lift the moratorium, there is a TANF child-only benefit of $182 a month. It may not be the $300 per month stipend that existed before, but it sure in the heck beats the blank. So there's a lot of work that's been done, and as you heard our chief say, as you heard our secretary say, we partner very strongly with the Administrative Office of the Courts, not just the standing meetings. Rachel Bingham and I, we're in constant contact, staff are in constant contact. We really are all working very hard and in this together to make this a better system for all of us involved. So how can you help us? Because that's the question. I've been a member of my church since I was a very young girl, generations of my family. But it is difficult sometimes to figure out, okay, I hear the need. How do I actually tangibly do something? It's actually getting something done, and what does that look like? Well, you've clearly heard us say that we need families. We also need provision of need. I can tell you that while we would like to think that every child that is put in a placement stays in that single placement during the life of their time in care, we would be very naive to think that. And what happens, which I think should have all of us be very distressed, is that when children are moved, they put their things in a garbage bag to go to wherever they're moving to. So one, that speaks to a couple things. We need to work harder to prevent the disruption in the first place so the child doesn't have to move. And how is that going to happen? That's going to happen by having respite services for these families, because everybody needs a timeout. With my own biological children, sometimes I needed a timeout. They're no different. They need transportation services. You want me to run here, there, and everywhere to make sure a child is meeting this medical appointment, this therapy appointment, dealing with this school issue. I need some help. Again, ease of training, visitation services. We need to make that easy and convenient for families across the state instead of always happening in a sterile DCBS office. So provision of need, back to the garbage bag dynamic, because I want you to understand just how prevalent of an issue this is in the state. We had data pulled, and last year, children moved 5,558 times. Now, if I think about a garbage bag scenario over 5,500 times, we should all be shocked, appalled, and feel shame. The least we can do is give these children some dignity. That is the very least we can do. So provision of need, what does that look like? A duffel bag drive, some type of adequate luggage that social workers can have at their disposal, so when they're called in to say this home is disrupting for whatever reason, and sometimes the moves are appropriate, so I would be remiss if I didn't say that. Children do progress, they step down, they're in a residential setting, we found a foster family, it's appropriate, but it's not appropriate for that move to take place with them putting their things in a garbage bag. Pack and plays, portable cribs. I sit on the Child Fatality, Near Fatality Advisory Panel, and I can tell you, and that's you hear the worst of the worst cases, and I hope one day to not have to sit on that panel, because I hope to one day not be in a state where we are experiencing children being killed or almost killed because of what is going on at home. But I can tell you that we have a number of cases that we have reviewed as a panel where safe sleep has been an issue, not the only issue. Typically, we're dealing with parents that are impaired caregivers. You heard the impact of drug abuse. And so what happens? I'm impaired. I put this baby down in a place that they shouldn't be sleeping, and I wake up and the child dies. Not okay. So, having adequate sleeping arrangements in these homes is an issue. How can you help? Get a pack and play drive going. Get a portable crib drive going. Reach out to our local offices to say, I have 10 pack and plays. When you're in a home and you see that there aren't adequate sleeping arrangements for infants, come get one. These are tangible ways that you can help us, help these families that are in desperate need of help. So you heard our governor mention fatherhood engagement. You heard various ways that you can support us. You're going to hear from Pastor Soares, who we're thrilled could be here with us today, how he actually took the vision and made that a reality in his state of New Jersey. So I just thank you for your time today. I thank you for taking the time to care, to listen. And, again, I stay charged every day. My team stays charged every day. That's not going to stop. We've done much work over the past 14 and a half months, but there's a lot more that we can be doing, but we can't do it by ourselves. And, in some ways it shocks me because this isn't brain science, this isn't brain surgery, it's common sense. And you have people that are compelled because of their own personal passions and beliefs and convictions that want to help. Shame on us if we would not take advantage of that, because it does take a village to make a difference in the lives of these children. So with that, I now have the pleasure of introducing the Reverend Dr. DeForest B. Soares. And our governor had the pleasure of meeting Pastor Soares early on in his administration and was very pleased, obviously, with what he saw that he had been able to accomplish in New Jersey, and said, you all need to get him here. And so we did that. And we had the opportunity of physically meeting him last November, and despite what you read on paper, which I'll read his bio, but I can tell you that his heart and his passion came shining through. From the moment he sat down and spent just an hour and a half with us on an afternoon. He's done it. I mean, we were in awe. He's done what people can't figure out how to do. And we are thrilled that he is here and willing to partner with us, so hopefully we can stand up and have the same success story and be invited to other states to give the same message of how we did it in Kentucky. So Dr. Soares has served as senior pastor of First Baptist Church of Lincoln Gardens, in Somerset, New Jersey since November 1990. His pastoral ministry focuses on spiritual growth, educational excellence, economic empowerment, and faith-based community development. As a pioneer of faith-based community development, Dr. Soares' impact on First Baptist Church of Lincoln Gardens and the community has been tremendous. In 1992, he founded the Central Jersey Community Development Corporation, a 501c3 nonprofit organization that specializes in helping vulnerable neighborhoods. In 1996, the Central New Jersey Community Development Corporation, CJCDC, launched Harvest of Hope Family Services Network, Inc. This organization seeks to develop permanent solutions for foster children and parents. From 1999 to 2002, Dr. Soares served as New Jersey's Secretary of State, making him the first African American male to do so. He also served as the former chairman of the United States Election Assistance Commission, which was established by Congress to implement the Help America Vote Act of 2002. In 2005, Dr. Soaries launched the D-Free Financial Freedom Movement. The D-Free strategy teaches people how to break free from debt. In 2011, Dr. Soaries wrote his first book, D-Free, Breaking Free from Financial Slavery, which highlights his top 12 keys to debt-free living. The book was updated and introduced in 2015 under the current title of Say Yes to No Debt, 12 Steps to Financial Freedom. Dr. Soaries currently serves as an independent director at Independence Realty Trust, a position he has held since February 2011. He also served as an independent director of the Federal Home Loan Bank of New York since 2009. And in 2015, he became a director of Owen Financial Corporation. Dr. Soaries earned a Bachelor of Arts degree from Fordham University, a Master of Divinity degree from Princeton Theological Seminary, and a Doctor of Ministry degree from United Theological Seminary. Dr. Soaries resides in Monmouth Junction, New Jersey, with his wife, Donna, and twin sons. Please give me a warm welcome for Dr. Soaries.
Thank you so much. I am grateful to God for this opportunity to be in this place. I'm grateful to be in Kentucky. It snowed in New Jersey this morning, so if for no other reason, you helped me escape our third snowstorm. To your great governor, let's give the governor and the First Lady a round of applause. I just admire the governor. I thought we agreed on most things till I found out he had 9 children. I have twin sons, and I named them Alpha and Omega. So you're the beginning and you're the end. But what a great vision, what a great passion. I have spent time with numerous governors and in response to many of their requests, but never in this country have I met a governor and first lady who have such a passion for the children who need us most. Thank you so much, First Lady and Governor. To Chief Justice Minton, I didn't tell him this, but now I can say it because the cameras are on. I've not always felt this comfortable in a courthouse. You know, first part of my years, I had some encounters that resulted in passing through the corridors of justice, and I was on the wrong side. And so thank God for personal transformation, and I feel right at home with the Chief Justice. Thank you for your hospitality. And to Secretary Glisson, when we had our conference call last week, I felt like she was exceeding her governmental authority, and she was trampling on ecclesiastical territory. Now I know why. She is a preacher, and a good preacher at that. Commissioner Johnson is a rare public servant, and she has proven that you can be inside a bureaucracy, but the bureaucracy not be inside you. And she is just a dynamic advocate and leader for the children of this state. To my colleagues in the ministry, I see Pastor Palmer over there, who's a great leader, and to Reverend Smizer and Chitwood, thank you for your great prayer, and Reverend Smith. I am, any members of the legislature, members of the cabinet, I'm honored to be here. When my sons were very young, probably 3rd or 4th grade, our doorbell rang in the middle of an afternoon, and when I opened the door, it was a police officer. And the police officer, upon seeing me, said, "Is everything all right in this house?" And I said, everything is fine. Why do you ask?" He said, because someone from this address dialed 911. And I said, well, I can't imagine who dialed 911. I didn't dial 911. I called my wife. She said, I didn't dial 911. And my younger twin, hearing the conversation, said, oh, I dialed 911. I said, you dialed 911? Why did you dial 911? He said, well, in school yesterday, our teacher said, if you ever need help, dial 911. And Mom told me to make up my bed and clean up my room. And I needed some help. So I dialed 911. I said, you're going to need more help than that. And I assured the officer that everything was all right and shut the door and made sure I locked up the phone so he couldn't reach it. But at an early age, our children, like all of us, learn that there are some things that require help from the government. There are some government responsibilities that we need to access, and we need, therefore, strong leadership, and we need effective government, and we need to understand that without government on a local and county and state and federal level that really works for people, then the quality of our lives will not be what it could be and what it should be. But there comes a point in our lives when each of us recognizes that the most effective government cannot solve the most critical challenges that we have. And when I served in public office and traveled to other countries describing America, to Belgium, I was lecturing in the embassy in South Africa, speaking to young people in Israel, speaking to a think tank that was thinking through the future of Israeli government. I never failed to mention the fact that to be like America, or to understand America, requires deeper thought than simply the execution of free and fair elections or the construction of a free enterprise system and watching the Dow Industrial Average go above 20,000. To understand America is to understand that beyond the exercise of government and the authority of the public sector is civil society, where churches and mosques and synagogues and community organizations and caring people make this country what it is. You take away the volunteers in the court system. You take away the directors of hospitals and universities. You take away people who are willing to care and nurture children who are not their biological products. And this country falls on its face immediately. And so this is not rocket science, and it's not unique that to be America, we must engage in the construction and the reconstruction of a common consensus that we are, in fact, our brothers and our sisters' keepers. And this foster care system has proven to be not only complicated, but frightening. Because often the victims become the criminals, and the caregivers become the targets. And what we have left is a social morass of failure and destruction. And so I am absolutely profoundly moved by the passion coming from the top. For while government cannot solve all of the problems, government does require leadership that's passionate, that's integral, that's flat-footed. And I never thought Kentucky would be the place. But I'm hearing from the governor and first lady and their team of leaders, partnering with legislative leaders and judiciary, I'm hearing today an announcement that Kentucky will not only be known for horses and basketball, but now Kentucky will lead the nation in taking care of the needs of the most vulnerable children that we have. Give yourself a round of applause. Yeah. So we're really talking about three things. One is bringing to a level of awareness challenges that many people just don't know exist. Life is complicated. You don't have to be in foster care to have a complicated life. Try to raise twins and get them out of your house by the time they're 30. That's complicated. Try to deal with the shift in technology. That's complicated. Life is complicated. And sometimes life is so complicated, we don't look up above the rim of our own complications into the larger complications of society. So it's not that we're bad people, it's not that we're mean people. We give money away, we support institutions, we rescue not only children from other nations, we rescue entire nations. There are girls going to school in Afghanistan because of us. There are children in Africa eating because of us. Blindness caused by disease among people who live near rivers in Africa is being cured because of us. We have leveraged our power and our resources more effectively than any country ever to exist in any part of the world at any time in history. We're not a mean people, but we just don't know. When the governor of New Jersey came to my church and said, "We need your help in foster care," I had already earned 3 degrees. I had awards from various organizations. Our church was what you might call a successful church. I just didn't know. I didn't know the kind of data that was revealed to you today. I didn't know that children in foster care were prime targets for human traffickers. I didn't know that the foster care system was a pipeline to the prison system, and that more likely than not, children coming out of foster care would end up on drugs or in jail. I just didn't know. I wasn't dumb, but I was ignorant to this issue, and that's why it takes this level of attention being brought to this type of problem, because many people just don't know. They don't know how hard it is to be a foster parent. I didn't know that in New Jersey we were losing more foster parents every year than we were signing up. We had a negative retention rate in large measure because it was so tough to be a foster parent, because the social workers and the caseworkers were so overworked, they couldn't provide the support that foster parents needed. I didn't know that it was hard to get the medical records of a foster child. I didn't know that sometimes you could not terminate parental rights for a child even if the parent was serving a life sentence in jail. I didn't know. And the way we were able to move from a segregated society to an integrated society in large measure because the nation was able to see on national television the pain and trauma of the civil rights movement. And when the public began to know the devastating effects and the embarrassing realities of segregation, that's when America stood up and said, we're going to change. We've got to bring as much focus on a national level to the problem that happens in every state, to the children in foster care, as we did blacks locked up in civil rights segregation. So in our state, when the governor came to me and said, we need your help in foster care, and at that time we had our only female governor, I said to her, well, Governor, what do you need? And she said, well, our biggest problem is this. We have 57 children that are border babies in our state. If I didn't know about foster care, I certainly didn't know about border babies. The border baby in New Jersey at that time was the SNAP child in Kentucky at this time. I never knew SNAP meant children. I thought SNAP was new stock that you bought on the stock exchange. I didn't know SNAP. 57 children. When the governor said to me, border babies, I thought to myself, what is a border baby? I thought a border baby was a baby maybe brought over the border. I didn't know what a border baby was. And she said, well, here's what's happening. These young people in our urban centers are having children. They registered in the hospital under a false name. They sneak out, Reverend, in the middle of the night, and the child is stuck there in the hospital, boarding in the hospital. The state has a statutory obligation to remove the child from the hospital within a certain amount of time and put them in a caring, loving home, because the longer the child stays in a sterile environment, although it's clean, it contributes to the likelihood of their developing psychological and emotional defects over time. And so in the meantime, they just get volunteers to come and touch the child. And the state was taking too long to remove the children from the hospitals because, like in Kentucky and New Jersey, we had a paucity of families that were willing to do that work. And my first response was, these children are not in the neighborhood of my congregation, and so let's find some people that can help. And she said, we tried that, and you're my last choice. You're my last option. I've called everybody I know. And I said, how many children? She said, 57. I'll get you 57 families. And in 6 weeks, we had 85 families. They were all trained and licensed. We took all the children out of the hospital. We fixed the border baby problem in 2 months. I called the governor and said, I've done what you asked me to do. Now, 19 years later, we've trained and licensed 465 families to be foster families. We've placed 1,444 children into those homes, and we've adopted 300. So much for my 2-month project. But it all started with awareness. You can't fix what you don't know exists. Then it also meant we had to accept responsibility. I have a growing congregation, and if you have a growing congregation, there's work to do all the time. Before I had a growing congregation, I had a non-growing congregation, and when you have a non-growing congregation, there's work to do all the time. And there's enough work to do within the confines of the structure to not look for extra work. But as the governor, who was the state, came to the preacher, which was the church, and as all of the voices and the noise is being made around the separation of church and state, I had to be reminded from my Baptist heritage that the separation of church and state was not designed to protect the state from the church. It was designed to protect the church from the state. Which meant that the church had a responsibility to help the state be the state. We pay no property taxes, but we have police protection. And we pay no property taxes because built into the legal infrastructure of our country in every state in America is this assumption that a church, just a physical church structure, is an inherently beneficial use of land. That's policy. Well, if a church is inherently beneficial, then the church has to be inherently beneficial to more than just itself. There ought to be value that is reciprocal as a church benefits from living in a country and functioning in a nation that protects the freedom of worship. That's a benefit. Then the community and the state and the nation should benefit by the worship of a people who claim to believe in a God that has given us both power and responsibility. And so as I began thinking about our role and whether or not this was the right fit, I had to think about the fundamentals of all great religions. When you look at Judeo-Christian heritage, and even add the global billion-person Islamic tradition to it, you realize that this is supposed to be who we are. Moses had a foster mother. Pharaoh's daughter saw the basket and said, he's not mine, but I claim him. And then God arranged for Moses' mother to work for his foster mother and got his biological milk from his own mother, even though she was working for his foster mother. Esther had an uncle named Mordecai, but Mordecai functioned as Esther's foster dad, and Esther would have never gone to see the king unless her foster dad, Uncle Mordecai, had said, maybe you've been called to the kingdom for such a time as this. Ruth wouldn't have had any place in the biblical text had it not been for Naomi. And when Ruth's husband died, Naomi said, come on with me. Abraham and Lot, walk with me through the Hebrew Bible, and you'll find this model of people raising children and young people who are not their biological parents. Muhammad adopted a child. And when Muhammad's adopted child grew up and had a wife and then had a divorce, Muhammad, the Islamic prophet, actually released his adopted son to take back his biological name. Jesus had a foster father. You don't think Joseph had much to do with Jesus, do you? But the angel told Joseph, even though your girlfriend is not pregnant with your baby, you raise him like your own. And so when Jesus was 12, hung around in Jerusalem, Joseph showed up and reprimanded Jesus as his foster dad, and then Jesus said, but I'm working for my real father. My point is, religion has to do more than cause the religious to celebrate themselves. But religion should spur us to care about the orphans and the widows and the least of God's children. And so we had to accept responsibility as a congregation to be for these children what our Creator had called us to be. But you can be aware and you can accept the responsibility and still not know what to do. And what I've promised Governor Bevan and the Commissioner is that the 19 years of practical experience in recruiting people to be foster parents, in providing support to those who had signed up, in having respite care available, in buying those cribs that weren't in the state's budget, and getting backpacks for children so they'd feel normal, in celebrating in community. One of our achievements over the years was this: while New Jersey had a negative retention rate for foster parents, we had an 85% retention rate because we implemented a program called Care for the Caring. So of the 3,500 families for which I'm responsible, when the mortgage crisis hit, we did loss mitigation and housing counseling for our foster parents first. When the mental health community offers resources to the neighborhood, we offer mental health resources to the foster parents first. You see, if one foster parent has a bad experience with separation anxiety, they have 3 friends that know that they're going through that. Those 3 people are no longer eligible for recruitment because they don't want to go through what their friend went through. We celebrate all of the foster children's birthdays in community. We integrate the foster children into Sunday school and choir and field trips and junior ushers. We embed foster care in the ministry of the church. You can't join First Baptist without being invited to be a foster parent. Come to Jesus, register to vote, and be a foster parent. Those are the 3 things. And what we want, President, we want, you give me 100 Baptist churches. We'll get those 385 children. Because this cannot be a special project that we do when we have time. Like we have to change the foster care system, we've got to change the culture of people who sing praises to God on Monday and won't lend a hand to help anybody on Tuesday. We have to change the culture of the church. This is not extracurricular. This is not a fancy fad. This is fundamental to who we are. How can we say we are a nation that has on its money, in God we trust, yet we can adopt a child from Russia before we can adopt a child from Louisville? We have to know how to do it, and what I've promised the governor, at no expense to the state of Kentucky, we're going to bring all of our experience, all of our team, all of our capacity, all of what we know how to do, because we know how to do this. We know how to convince people to come to church on Sunday morning and be as committed to foster care ministry as the choir is to singing and as the ushers are to ushering. We have to embed it in the body and the fabric of the ministry to get the outcomes that this state needs a partner to produce. And so I'm thrilled to have met Governor Bevin. I've met other governors who said to me what he said before I met him. But I can tell you without fear of successful contradiction, this team under this leadership has done more, has organized more effectively, has taken this to a high level of priority than any governor in the United States of America, including my own. See, my governor's become famous for some things, but not this. And what I'm telling you is that the future of this state depends upon our willingness to take this on as our responsibility. I was giving up at one point in my early ministry, First Lady, and it was just too hard to help people, too hard to convince people to help people, too hard to speak to people like social workers who work just as hard as people in the private sector, but they make no stock options. They don't make overtime. Sometimes the social workers in our team, they got to buy their own tissues so that when they meet with the clients, they can give them tissues because of their tears. These are people who sometimes spend their own money keeping the receipts, knowing they'll never be reimbursed. These are the angels of the public sector bridging the gap between survival and total collapse. And I said, I can't spend all of my life doing this kind of work. I've got to go somewhere, make some money, get some stock so I can retire. Like social workers, young preachers working in the church, or young community activists working in the nonprofit sector, no retirement. I didn't know what a 401k was till I was 35. Didn't have one, but at least I knew what it was. And I heard a story from another young preacher that changed my life, because he helped me understand how to measure success in this space. You won't change the whole country overnight. You won't touch every life in a week. But this young preacher said to me that there was a valley. And in that valley, there were people who were physically challenged because there was a genetic problem that caused their arms to be stunted. And so everybody in this valley had short arms. And they were in the valley because the government had provided for them food and vegetables and all kinds of environmental conditions that would mitigate the challenge of their genetic problem. And a missionary took a man through this valley, and it was quite distressing, because while the environment was good, the people were literally dying on their feet. They were drawn, they were weak, and the tourist said to the guide, why would these people be in such bad physical condition when their environment has provided everything they need? And the guide said, well, the tragedy is that these people, because they have short arms, when they use the long spoons that the government has provided to feed themselves, they pick up the food and they keep missing their mouths, and they just can't survive. And on the way out of the valley, There was a second group of people, same valley, same conditions, but these people were healthy and vibrant and strong. They smiled, they sang, and the tourist said to the guide, I don't understand. This second group has the exact same circumstances and conditions and challenge of the first group, but these people are all right. And the young people, the young preacher said in this story that the guide said to the tourist, I want you to see that. He said the second group realized that if they did like the first group, that they would miss their mouths with their long spoons and their short arms, and they would die from malnutrition. But they woke up one day and realized if they reach out with their short arms and their long spoons, and when they pick up their food, instead of feeding themselves, they would just reach out and feed each other. That they all could survive their handicap and rise above their conditions and use what they had to get what they needed. What we have to do in Kentucky to lead this nation is to prove that black, white, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, Jewish, Muslim, urban, suburban, rich, poor, we have to be like that second group of people. If we're going to lead the nation, it will be because despite our handicaps and despite our differences, that the grace of God has given us the humility and the passion to reach out and feed each other and rise above and solve this problem. God bless you.
Pastor Soares, I want to thank you for being with us here today. I want to thank you for being an inspiration to us and a teacher to us, because I know you can teach it to us and what you've done in New Jersey and how we can put that into good effect here in Kentucky. I am Tim Feely, Deputy Secretary of the Cabinet for Health and Family Services and a former family court judge. And when I've heard all these inspirational stories, I want to share one that I've had because it really brings home why I'm doing what I'm doing and why you all are doing what you're doing. And it's a true story from a case that was before me as a family court judge, when it was brought to me that a little 4-year-old boy was living with his father and his father's girlfriend in a trailer. And the father and the girlfriend had a disagreement, so the girlfriend moved 2 trailers down. The little boy liked the girlfriend more than he liked the father, so he kept running out the door and going down to the trailer 2 steps down. So the father decided to keep the little boy from doing that. He'd take a bowling ball, drill a hole in it, attach a chain to it, and chained it to the boy's foot. When we found out about it and a cabinet worker got in, we were able to remove that child from that abusive home and take him to a foster care home. And I'll never forget the story that the social worker told me when she drove up to the very nice suburban foster home that this child was going to. He looked up and he says, "Is this where I'm going to live?" And the social worker said, "Well, yes, this is where you're going now as a foster home." He said, "This has always been my dream." That's why we need good foster families in Kentucky. Now, I came on board at the request of Secretary Glisson and Governor Bevin because I wanted to make a difference statewide. I loved being a family court judge because you could really make a difference on a one-on-one basis. But the ability to make some statewide difference really led me to come here, and I know that's why you're all here today. With the Governor's leadership and with the help of the First Lady's office, the Administrative Office of the Courts, the Legislature, the Cabinets of Justice, Public Safety, Education, and Workforce Development, we are working at the Cabinet for Health and Family Services very hard to make things better for children in Kentucky. The Governor and Secretary Glisson talked about some of the improvements we've made. We've got a long way to go. And our team is dedicated that over the next year we're going to be looking at all of our policies and statutes to make Kentucky the best state in the nation for foster care and adoption. But we can't wait till that can all be done. We need to act and work now. The Cabinet is working with Kentucky Youth advocates, with the Dave Thomas Foundation, with the Annie Casey Foundation, and the Casey Family Foundation. These are national groups in fashioning how we should address this problem. We're also working very closely with our provider community. Many of them are here with us today. Many of them feel that they're part of the nonprofit group that we're reaching out to. But we need to reach out to the faith-based groups in Kentucky and the nonprofit groups to solicit your help in getting done what we need to do for children in Kentucky. Now, I've traveled around the state a lot. I've talked to a lot of people, and there's a lot of great things being done by churches and Rotary clubs and Lions clubs in Kentucky. But what we're lacking is a coordination. What we're lacking is a central place to get that information out. We will be working on that over the next couple months to come up with adopting a computer system, an internet-based computer system that's going to allow us to go into local communities and saying, this is what's needed in your community. This family needs a crib. This family needs some respite care. And by coordinating that, we hope to bring everybody together to work for those goals that Dr. Sori so eloquently spoke of today. So we're doing a reach out and asking for help. As we've said here today, and I'll say again, government can't do it all. We need to all work together to do this. And so if you look in your packet, I want to show you a couple things. One is there, you've got in your packet 2 sheets of paper that look like this. They're a breakdown of the children that we have that need homes right away by region and county. And what we're doing is going out to the churches in your communities and the nonprofits in your communities and saying, there's 400 children that need homes right now. 3 of them are in your town. 3 of them are in your county. Let's see if we can come up with 3 families in your county to help us to find a home for these children. The other thing that's in your packet is a contact form. And I'm asking everybody here today to fill out that form with your name, your organization, your email, and how you can help us help the children of Kentucky. And those of you watching on live streaming or watching this on Facebook, you can do the same thing by going to openhearts@ky.gov and provide the information there so that we can reach out to you to look at specificity of needs in your community that you can help us as we go forward. We need help recruiting good foster parents and foster families. We need help supporting the foster families that we have, because that's something with our overworked social workers, and I agree with everything that's said. The social workers we have are great, they're dedicated, they're overworked. It's an overworked system, we're working on that too, but they don't have the time and energy to do the follow-up, the foster cares that really is necessary. So we need help from the faith-based community, from community organizations to do the respite care, as was talked about earlier, to reach out and help those people so that we retain the foster families and we don't lose them. We also need help to adopt those hard-to-adopt children. We're working hard to make the system easier, but we need the homes for those children. We also need help in mentoring the older children in particular. As was discussed earlier, if children age out without having a forever home, it's tough. The statistic I saw recently was 43% of children who age out of foster care without having been adopted will end up being incarcerated sometime in their life. It's unacceptable. We need to change that. And one way we can change that is even if you don't adopt the 19 or 20-year-old, your community group, your church, take them in and find them a mentor that can work with them on employment, on how to go to a job interview, on education opportunities are there. And we need to work together to make sure we have jobs available, both for the parents who are supporting these families and for the children who are aging out. We're working that with our Fostering Success program, and I know the governor is working that very hard with Secretary Ramsey on workforce development areas. So we're asking you today, as a call out, to get engaged, to help us help the children of Kentucky as best we can. We're going to watch one more small video. If you're not inspired yet, if you weren't inspired by Dr. Soares or the governor, you haven't been listening. But we're going to have one more video to hopefully inspire you more. This is from a Pastor Chitwood, who spoke earlier, prayed with us earlier. And after that, we're going to call up Ben Smith. Pastor Smith is heading the task force to rejuvenate an office of faith-based and community services within the governor's office. He's been meeting regularly with individuals. He'll tell you a little bit about that story. Then we'll end with the governor coming again and giving an address and a call out to the people of Kentucky to help the children of Kentucky. So, this video would.
We had talked about it a lot, being a foster parent, and, you know, when we finally decided, I kept waiting for someone else to do.
We were trying to promote foster care among our churches here in the state. And before I knew it, I was in 40 hours of training and getting ready to foster parent. It's been hard, but it's been a joy as well. We've enjoyed the kids that have come into our home, and they've been a blessing to us as much or more than we've been a blessing to them.
Our first foster daughter, she came to us when she was 3, and she was afraid. I remember tucking her in first night, and she wanted to know if we would have food the next day. And that happened for about a week, and I finally got wise, and after her asking over and over, will there be food tomorrow, I decided, I'll put some Cheerios beside her nightstand, and that comforted her. It reassured her that, I'm full now, and tomorrow, if I'm hungry, I'll have something to eat. It's right here beside me. She is thriving. She is in preschool. She's learning her numbers and letters. I think Christians are looking for ways to change the world, and I can't imagine a more needed and better way to change the world than to take in a foster child. And if we had Christians stand up and take in foster children, we could change the whole face of Kentucky. Kentucky would look completely different if people of faith would stand up and do what they've been called to do.
It's time for us to stop waiting on the government to fix the system. If more and more people of faith were involved in the system, more and more people of faith were reaching out to these kids and to broken families, then we wouldn't be as dependent upon the government, and the system could be fixed simply by a great infusion of good, healthy, strong families who want to love the hurting kids of Kentucky.
We had talked about it a lot.
Good morning. How many of you are connected either to a church, temple, mosque, or synagogue, or a nonprofit organization? How about raising your hand? Oh, most everyone. Well, my background is a little different. I will also be brief. It has been suggested if I cannot be brilliant, being brief would be good. I spent a good portion of my life as corporate executive, American Express, Wells Fargo, and GMAC, then CEO of American Partners Bank in D.C., and I'm also a pastor. So I got to look at the world from both sides, and one of the things that occurred to me as a layperson attending churches was my lack of information about what needs were. And I distinctly remember in 2007 saying, well, we want to do something, but we don't know what to do. And a friend of mine said, Ben, while you're waiting on God, why don't you entertain the possibility He's waiting on you? They said, Will Rogers even said you could be on the right track, but if you don't go anywhere, you're still going to get run over. There's several Bible verses in the Old Testament about God telling someone to do something first and then a healing or a miracle occurred. Jesus told lepers, go and show yourself to the priest, and it wasn't until they took the first step that something dramatic happened. And it occurred to me, I have to confess, I was not aware until we started this task force of the huge size of the needs of the children in Kentucky. And I also have to confess, with day-to-day routines, it didn't come up and knock on my door. So I would like to encourage each of you here. Not everybody here is going to adopt a child, probably, although that would be a good thing. However, you probably know someone who would love to if they only knew both the urgency of the need and the opportunity for them to make a remarkable difference. Some of us need to change our point of view from asking for miracles to actually becoming someone else's miracle. And the exciting part, we have that opportunity. In James chapter 1, verse 27, it says, true worship is to take care of the orphans and the widows. And I think we have a unique opportunity to do that. There are approximately 16,000 if you take all the numbers and roll them together. We need this. I would like to ask you, if you have a pen, pull it out, and as Judge Feely said, fill out the contact information that you can leave with us. If you're watching this online and streaming, please take a second to send the email in. It can, in fact, change your life, and it most assuredly will also benefit someone else. And very briefly, we need foster parents who care. As Dr. Soares has said, going from a negative turnover to 85% was identifying people who care. Second thing is we need, obviously, adopted parents. But the third thing is you may not fit any of those buckets. Can you be a mentor for someone who is actually parenting? Give them a break. Talk to them. Be a resource. Most of us can do that regardless of our schedules. So I would strongly encourage that. If you're connected to a church and you have transportation opportunities, that would be a wonderful thing. I am really excited with the leadership, Governor and Ms. Bevan. I think with Secretary Glisson, Commissioner Johnson, the others of you that are here, we have an opportunity to make a difference in the state of Kentucky. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of it. Governor, I think you're up.
Thank you all very much again. I appreciate your patience. I appreciate your thought in being here. I appreciate those of you that are following along. What are we going to do about all that we've heard? I was struck as I heard some of these stories from Dr. Soares and others. I was struck by the analogy of the fellow walking through the valley and the two different things that he experienced. I want to share with you, caused me to think of something else that's actually a true geographical reality in the Middle East, and we've heard discussions about that. In the Middle East, 65 miles apart from one another are two bodies of water. They're very similar in many, many respects, not the least of which is they are literally both sourced by the very same source. The Jordan River flows into both of these individual bodies of water. And yet they're very different. One of them has an abundance of life around it, an abundance of homes that are around it, a number of fertile fields that are watered from it, and children that play on its shores, and boats that are on it, and fishermen who make their livelihood by being out on that body of water. What is that body of water, and why is it so different than this other body of water just a few miles down the road, also fed by the same Jordan River, around which there is nothing, around which there is literally nothing living? There are no buildings that people live in. There are no children playing. There's no fertile fields. What's the difference between the two of them? The difference is one of them you know of as the Sea of Galilee. That's the first one, the one that's alive. The second one is the Dead Sea. We've all heard of it. Why is one dead and one is alive? Because the first one takes water in and it sends that water back out. It gives back. The second one, the Dead Sea, only takes water in. It gives nothing back. We heard talk about Moses, probably one of the most famous people in world history to have been fostered. A man who led his people from slavery to freedom, to the promised land. In the course of doing so, after they had just finally been released, but before Pharaoh had second thoughts, they were on their way to the promised land. And they found themselves, when Pharaoh began to rethink his process and began to chase them with his armies, at the shore of another body of water. This one was the Red Sea. And they stood there, and I tell you, I was struck by something that I read not long ago. And I would encourage you to look at this. Every one of us knows the story of the Israelites leaving Egypt. We all know this story. But I was struck by something, and it's easy to remember because it's in Exodus, which means that they're leaving. We know that. But it's easy to remember because it's chapter 14, verses 15 and 16. So just 14, 15, 16. But I was struck by something, and that is, as they got there to the shore, and the armies were approaching behind them, and they were afraid, they began to cry out to God for some relief. They said, God, will you do something? You brought us out. People were grumbling. We should have gone back. We shouldn't have left. Everybody was fearful. They were smart enough and wise enough to realize that God was able to provide, and so they called out to him. Moses called out to God. And God said to Moses something that I had never really noticed or heard of in all the times that I'd heard that story. God said to Moses, don't just cry out to me. Don't just call out to me. Pick up your rod and do something. Pick up your rod and divide that water. Lead these people. So what are you going to do? And this is really, we've heard great things. We've been inspired and I hope motivated and in some measure shamed by the numbers that we see. This is our state. We are Kentucky. And this is our problem. And we are part of a nation that wrestles with this very same issue. In a nation as blessed as we are, in a nation as gifted as we are, in a nation as wealthy as we are, the fact that any child in any home wonders whether or not she's going to have food in the morning is crazy. It's unacceptable. So I would challenge you to continue to pray, to continue to seek God's providence, but to pick up your rod and do something. What are you going to do? We've just been given various ideas of things that you can do, whether it is adopting or fostering yourself or assisting those who do. Again, for those watching, go to Open Hearts, plural, at ky.gov. Give us your information. It will be taken care of. You're not going to be solicited for anything else, but if you have a heart to help, then go to openhearts at ky.gov and fill out the form that has been discussed. If you want to learn more about this whole process, you want to go to a website, do some homework, be reaffirmed of some of the thinking that you have, go to adopt.ky.gov. It's a website, adopt.ky.gov. These are things you can do. Take action. Step up. This is a time for boldness. We are going to fix this problem in Kentucky. We are going to lead the nation. And I'll tell you, I appreciate, Judge Feely, who you heard from a moment ago. He is now the Deputy Secretary for Health and Family Services. This was not an easy decision for him to make, as he noted. I looked around this state and I said, where is the best family court judge in Kentucky? And time and time and time again, his name came up. It's to take nothing away from so many others who do a good job on this front. But he was as good as I could find anywhere. And his willingness to come aboard, I'm grateful for. His willingness to lead. And yet he and the secretary and the commissioner, they are deep in the bureaucracy. As Dr. Soares noted, though, they've not allowed the bureaucracy to take root inside of them. But I'll tell you, it is hard to move through that bureaucracy. And yet these numbers are not so significant that we can't overcome them. 350 kids, 200 and some odd who are ready right now for a home. 6,000 churches in this state. Shame on us if we can't find homes for these children. These children should have homes within a matter of months. Frankly, within weeks or days. I would love to see just how quickly we can eliminate this backlog. Just as Dr. Stories and his church did with the border babies in New Jersey. They took 57 children and boom, in one church. This is 200 and something children. If every 30 churches took one child, if we can't find one home out of every 30 churches in Kentucky, why are we giving people tax breaks? Let's be honest. What is the mission and the purpose of our churches? If we cannot be the literal hands and feet of Christ, to reach out to the least of these, to be our brother's keeper, to take care of the orphans, then what in the blazes are we doing? And you don't even need to be a churched person to have a heart for the kind of thing we're talking about. But certainly within the communities where this is a passion, this is a mission statement, this is a reason for existence, there ought to be that kind of thinking. I want to challenge us to be bold in our thinking. I want to challenge the court system, starting at the very top, and I am grateful to our Chief Justice for being here today. Justice Minton, I appreciate you being here, but I want to challenge you and everybody in the judicial system to rethink why, for example, we bend over backwards too often to restore children back into a situation that is bad for them. I don't care if the person in that home is related to them or not. And we have got to rethink this. We have got to rethink this. Just recently, there was a little girl who was taken from the only home she's ever known. She was in a home with her 3 siblings, all biological siblings, where those 3 children had already been adopted by a family in Kentucky. Those children had been given up by the mother, who had drug problems and many other issues. She also had another child. That child was being fostered by this very same family, but had not yet been adopted. She was the only family, this was the only family that child had ever known. A judge in Kentucky literally just decided it wasn't appropriate for that mother not to have any of her children, took that one child out and gave it back to this mother who has wrestled with all these issues, who hasn't raised any of her children. Taking a child from a home that child knew, from the siblings that were her own, from the only parents who had ever loved or cared for her, that's broken. That's wrong. I don't care what the logic or thought process was behind that. That's inappropriate. And that kind of thinking has got to be rethought. Now, sometimes there are reasons for things. And I don't know, nor do any of us know every detail about every situation, and it is not easy to be a judge, because you are making life and death decisions in some instances with people's lives. But I'll tell you what, we need a matrix, we need a set of principles, we need clear delineated boundaries within which people can operate, where we don't allow things like that to happen, where parents who do step up to foster and adopt don't worry about whether that child's going to be snatched back out of their home. We need certainty, we need simplicity. Kentucky needs to be a state where it is as efficient, it is simply as cost-effective and simple a process as is possible to be a foster parent, to be an adoptive parent. It's got to be simple. It isn't, as was noted by several people. This is not rocket science. Being a parent doesn't come with a manual. You don't have to be a perfect parent, but we have got to incentivize homes where children can be raised. In the world, it's a problem too. There's 167 million orphans in the world by various estimates. 167 million in this country alone, millions of children. In this state, thousands, as we've noted. We can do better. Let Kentucky lead the charge. One thing that I am going to do, and I've made mention of this, I alluded to it in my State of the Commonwealth address, I'll say it again here now. And I'm in the process right now of finalizing the contract with this person. There's an individual who happens to be an adoptive parent, who has a heart for this and a passion for this, who's gainfully employed in another place and wasn't looking for an opportunity like this, but who I believe is the right person, who can rise above, as each of our individuals that you've heard from today. They are so deep in the forest that they spend their entire day climbing trees, chopping trees down, studying trees. They're in the forest looking at trees. We need someone who can rise above the canopy. We need somebody who can see both the individual trees, understand it from personal experience, know the other people in the forest working on the trees, but can rise above this and understand what's happening above the canopy. And so we are going to hire an individual whose sole responsibility will be to ensure that this backlog is eliminated. and that indeed that 8,000 is some fraction thereof, and that any child who comes into our system is in the best foster care system in America, and that any child available for adoption is adopted in Kentucky, and that we do become that beacon for the rest of America to look at. It can happen, it will happen. This person I hope to be able to announce sometime next week, and they will come on board and they will immediately get to work. They will report directly to me, but they will work hand in glove with each of those individuals that you've heard from. We are serious about this, but we need, as you have heard time and time again from those that have spoken, and you'll hear it again from me now, we need your help, each and every one of you. And each and every one of you knows 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, 50 people who might have been here, could have been here, would have been here, but for the fact that they have other circumstances who need to hear this message. Go to adopt.ky.gov. Go to that website. Give us your information at openhearts.ky.gov. Give us your information so that we can, in fact, be able to solve this problem. It's going to happen. We can do it. We are Kentucky. Be bold. Challenge the system. Those of you that are adoptive parents, we need your stories. We need your thoughts on how to make it better. Those of you that are fostering, we need your thoughts and your input on how to make it better. If you're watching this and you have already reached out to us and you've never heard back, reach out to us again. Literally, sometimes things slip through the system. Don't think, well, they don't care. We do care. If you've not picked up on that already, I hope you do now. We care. I care about this like very few things. This is something my wife and I are very, very passionate about. We are going to make this an example for the nation. Let's do it together. Let's challenge the status quo. Let's create the equivalent of rocket dockets for this situation within our system. We have it for other things. Let's use our judicial system to be an asset to, not an adversary to the very thing we've been talking about today. And I hope, Chief Justice, I hope you're moved by what we've heard today, and I hope it challenges you. I know you have a heart for this, but I hope we get a sense of urgency for this, where we can all work together with this individual who's going to come aboard, who's going to ensure that all the pieces are able to talk to one another. We are going to get this done. I'm grateful to you because you're going to be part of what makes it happen. Let's close things out by asking a dear friend and a man who really has a heart not only for America's children and Kentucky's children specifically, but for so many who are in need in our communities. A man who has poured his life, his energy, and his God-given talents into serving those folks. And we're going to be closed out in a word of prayer from the Reverend Matthew Smizer.
Let us stand and pray together. God, we're in all of your awesomeness, and we marvel at your magnificence because you are God. We thank you for what our eyes have seen and our ears have heard. You've burdened our hearts and giving us the marching orders to open our homes. With you leading our charge, we claim right now the victory for the children in our cities and counties, hamlets across this Commonwealth. We leave it in your hands now because we know in your hands you will motivate us to do what must be done for those who need it the most. Touch every heart that's in this place and every heart that is listening through whatever means to be motivated and moved to do what we know is right for our brothers and sisters. For as it has been said, we are our brother's keepers. We ask it in the mighty, miraculous, and matchless name of Jesus. Amen.